And I understood that the unborn child is really one of the modern day holy innocents. Herod slaughtered the little baby boys 2 years of age or less when he was trying to get rid of Christ, who he saw as a threat to him. And I do believe that the reason why abortion is legalized is because our world is trying to get rid of Christ and this and his teaching and his truth and his life and his light. And this is why abortion goes on. And that's not to judge anybody who's had an abortion.
Hello, Father John. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, hello, Isabel, and it's a pleasure for me to be with you today. Thank you.
Maybe just to start with, do you want to just say, where you're from and just introduce yourself for people who aren't familiar with you?
Certainly, yes. I'm Father John Peynton. I'm a priest of the Archdiocese of Birmingham, and I'm presently the parish priest of St Dunstan's in King's Heath and St Jude's of the Maypole.
So I know you've been involved in pro-life work in one way or another for a long time, Father, but maybe just to start with by looking at growing up for you, was that always the case? Were you always interested in pro-life? Do you come from a pro-life family or was it the opposite?
Well, no, I certainly do come from a pro-life family. We were a traditional Irish Catholic family, but I can remember from a young age always being aware that abortion was wrong. And I remember particularly there was an incident when I was about 13. I was at secondary school. It was a small all-boys school, and it wasn't a Catholic school. And one of my friends told me that his aunt was going to have an abortion because she had an affair and she was going to get rid of the unborn child, as he put it. And I remember explaining to him that this was wrong and that the child could be kept. And the friend said, "What? Keep an unwanted baby?" And I said, "Well, the child won't be unwanted by everybody. It might be possible for the child to be adopted." And I can remember then I went to the sixth form college when I was doing my A-levels, and I can remember there being a debate on abortion. And I remember defending the Catholic Church's position. Not everybody agreed with me, but some people did. So being supportive, particularly of the unborn, has always been important to me.
When you say, at that young age, even, when you were at secondary school, you felt it was wrong, what do you think that would have meant to you then? Like, why do you think you felt so strongly that it was wrong at such a relatively young age, really?
To be honest with you, as far as I can honestly remember, it was almost something instinctive in me. Because look at any other creature that God has made and they protect their young.
Yeah.
And these are creatures that don't have the spiritual relationship with God that we do. To me, it's something fundamental in God's creatures, that to protect your young and never to destroy them.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I always think that it is a natural thing for a child to recognise, unless they're taught to dehumanise the preborn child, which sadly happens so often.
I do honestly believe that children already have the truth, but it's how it gets taken away from them, rather than us giving them the truth.
Yes.
Mm-hmm,
So what do you think would have been your first sort of active pro-life thing? Obviously you talked about it, like you said. I know you've been actively involved in pro-life activities. Do you think there was a first thing that you can remember doing?
The first thing I can remember, I was already at university. I was about 19, and there was a pro-life, I think it was probably called anti-abortion at that time, rally in London. I remember a coachload of us went from Birmingham, and we took part in this march, basically. And that's perhaps the first sort of active thing that I can remember. Yes.
And what do you think sort of was the legacy of that for you? Did you feel inspired by it? Did you gain something from it, do you think?
Oh, I certainly did feel inspired, and I felt that, the pro-life cause was one that I needed to support and that other people needed to support also.
So you obviously, even like you said, from your late teens, you were really taking sort of ownership of that belief yourself and
exactly,
on your own initiative going to these events.
Yes.
I know at some point you started going outside abortion centres, Father. How old would you have been then?
Probably in my mid-20s. This would be like the early 90s. And there was a group who were already praying outside the Calthorpe Clinic in Arthur Road in Edgbaston. And they were led by a priest, an oblate of Mary Immaculate, Father Noel Ormond. And a friend of mine had joined the Legion of Mary in my branch that I was a member of, and he encouraged me to come along and pray with him outside the abortion clinic, and I think that's how I got involved. The group had a great sort of spiritual foundation. They would have a holy hour on the Friday evening every week before the Blessed Sacrament, and then on the Saturday morning they'd go and pray outside this abortion clinic. There's probably about 10 or 12 of them all together. And then after praying outside the clinic and maybe trying to talk to the people who were going into the clinic, although most of them would be driven in, so it was very difficult to actually contact them as such. But the group would then have Mass back at the church where the priest was based. And I really saw that particular action as being very much part of the spiritual warfare that is going on all the time. And I understood that the unborn child is really one of the modern day holy innocents. Herod slaughtered the little baby boys 2 years of age or less when he was trying to get rid of Christ, who he saw as a threat to him. And I do believe that the reason why abortion is legalized is because our world is trying to get rid of Christ and this and his teaching and his truth and his life and his light, and this is why abortion goes on. And that's not to judge anybody who's had an abortion, but that is perhaps the outcome of the spiritual warfare, which is very real.
And would that have been one of your key motivations then, do you think? Because obviously you were somebody who
certainly was
had a strong faith.
The key motivation.
Yes. And when you were there then, Father, I mean, I know obviously from what you've said, and I know from work I've been involved in, we want to offer help and alternatives to women considering abortion. But I know also you've shared with me before how sometimes you were just awakening the conscience of some of the neighbours in that locality, weren't you?
Well, that's very true. I remember one particular instance. We were praying outside the clinic, and then a lady came and joined us, stood with us. And when we finished the Decade of the Rosary, I think I was expecting trouble, if I'm honest with you. But she handed the priest an envelope. And she said how she was a neighbour of the clinic, and she greatly admired this group coming week after week in all weathers and the action that we were trying to do. And I remember her saying, "You must have expenses, so here's some money towards that, and you can use it in whatever way you want." But she just wanted to give a gesture of her support. That was unforgettable, it really was, yes.
Yeah, I do remember being in that locality because that was the abortion centre that I first started to pray outside as well. Quite a lot of the neighbours were actually very supportive, certainly by the time I was joining in the vigils and things anyway, and some of them would say, come and have a cup of tea, or some of them would say, if we had a poster explaining what we were doing, you can leave it at my house if you need to and things. So there was a lot of support in that locality, which is really encouraging, even from people who maybe didn't feel motivated to actually get involved. They still recognised the good of what was being done there. And what about maybe from further afield, politicians, MPs? Did you get any kind of good or bad response from any of them?
Well, the response that I can remember, I think, certainly the people who were running the clinic would be trying to tell us that what we were doing was something we weren't entitled to do, or we were breaking the law. And I think one of the group wrote to the local MP at that time, who was Dame Jill Knight. And she wrote back to this person. And I think the first paragraph was explaining the legal perspective, but then she finished the letter by putting in writing that she thought we were absolutely right to be making our protest, as she called it, and she wanted to give us her full support. And it was really a great affirmation, to see that from an MP, and she was quite a well-known MP, in writing like that. Yes.
Well, it'd be nice to have a few of those around now, Father, with a bit of backbone. So was it mainly just Catholics there, or were there any other Christians who were involved in your witness
Indeed,
at the
there
time?
were other Christians, particularly Pentecostal Christians.
Oh, lovely.
And they worked with us in a very positive way. They would be there when we were praying outside the clinic. They might not join in all the prayers. They had different theological beliefs. But they had some sort of house where pregnant ladies could go and could keep their child while they sorted out some arrangement for the child. So we would work with them.
Yeah.
And, we would try and make contact with the ladies and maybe refer them to those Christians. So it was a very good partnership.
And I think that's a reminder that, throughout the time that pro-lifers have been engaged in work, the prayer has always gone hand in hand with that offer of
Absolutely,
help
yes.
and that real support. It's not just a case of standing there self-righteously praying. It's a
indeed
case
not,
of
no,
really being
no,
able to concretely offer whatever help was needed.
Absolutely,
even in those
yes.
early days. So I know as you went into working life, you were working in the chemist field,
Yes, I was
weren't
a
you?
research chemist. Yes, I studied chemistry at university, and then I worked for 13 years before I tried my vocation to the priesthood with a chemical firm in Oldbury in the West Midlands. And we worked trying to make our products, the firm's products, more environmentally acceptable. So, but at the time when I was involved in that group at Calthorpe Clinic, I was working as a research chemist, yes.
So you were maybe a slightly later vocation than a lot of priests?
Yes,
Yeah,
I was.
yeah.
I like to call it a mature vocation.
Oh, I like that, Father. Although you sounded like very mature from a young age in the sort of things that you were doing. So as a priest now then, Father, is this an issue that comes up much in your ministry in any way, the issue of abortion?
I think the most way it's come up really is in the confessional.
Right.
And I've certainly, there's been quite, I wouldn't say a huge number, but, an appreciable number of almost entirely ladies who might have had an abortion maybe many years ago, maybe decades ago, and are greatly hurt and greatly burdened by the experience. And, they are confessing this and they feel terrible guilt. And so this has made me sensitive towards those who had that experience. I can't remember very many men coming who might have been involved with an abortion. It's been almost entirely ladies. And this is why, because I do organize pro-life vigils from time to time. Maybe I used to organize them so they would coincide with the Feast of the Holy Innocents. And when I've been promoting them, I've always said that is to make reparation for the evil of abortion and also to pray for healing for all hurt by abortion. I think the experience in the confessional has increased my sensitivity towards those who have been damaged.
And the fact that you've had, maybe from what you've just said, so few men coming forward, and we know that obviously men play an equal part with regards to abortion. Obviously, often it can be a man coercing a woman that pressures her into doing that. Do you think it's important then that we do get more men joining the pro-life movement? Like in a way like what you're talking about, almost in reparation maybe for those sins that have been committed.
Oh, I think that's essential. I really do. It was very good when we had that event there before the Covent 40 Days for Life campaign. We had men as speakers who talked about their experiences, and it's wonderful to see them involved in the pro-life movement.
So being part of the Catholic Church then, Father, often people will recognise that particularly the Catholic Church has very strong and definite teachings on the sanctity of life.
Yes.
It might seem a very basic question, but why do you think that is such an important part of the Catholic Church's teaching? Because as I say, a lot of people will know the Church's teaching in that area. Even people who aren't Catholics will know the Church has very strong teachings on abortion. Why do you think that is, has been and still is a very important aspect of the Catholic faith?
Well, the Catholic Church exists because Christ has founded it, and he's promised to be with it until the end of time, and it's been governed and guided by the Holy Spirit, and its role is to make known the truth revealed by God. And we know from the Ten Commandments, one of the Ten Commandments is, thou shalt not kill. And really, the Ten Commandments were really given to reinforce what we should be able to deduce by what we call natural law. And as I said earlier, it's almost instinctive in God's creatures to protect their young. But the church is being guided to look at the different ways in which life is under threat, and particularly in the modern world with modern developments. And this is why it teaches not only against abortion, but also against the use of artificial contraception, or homosexual acts which are close to life. The Holy Spirit is guiding us to recognize the sanctity of life at all stages, and also the great privilege God has given us in giving us the capacity to be involved in the generation of human life. It's a privilege he didn't give to the angels. There's no angelic race like there is a human race. So this is a great privilege, but because our enemy is working against us, and this is why we have the challenges that we do.
And you've spoken about that sort of spiritual battle that's going on, particularly surrounding abortion. Considering you've been quite heavily involved in pro-life work, have you ever felt that sort of spiritual battle? People talk about being under spiritual attack. Is that something that you ever felt yourself in any way, being involved in your ministry?
I think I have, not sort of physically, but very often, particularly, and it's even a little bit of it in this present 40 Days for Life campaign. You tend to get other battles elsewhere in your life when you're taking part in the 40 Days for Life campaign. It's very clear that our enemy doesn't like it, and he tries to stop us. Yeah.
And I know you are, as you've just mentioned, still very actively involved in 40 Days for Life, along with other priests in Birmingham, and we're very blessed to have you every week. You're coming to pray with us. Why do you think that is so important? Because you seem very kind of motivated to do that. I know a lot of priests who would be saying, that they obviously care very much about life, but maybe wouldn't be as motivated in that area. Why are you so passionate in that area, Father?
Well, I think as a priest, of course, God has granted me even more privileges. And it is a great privilege to be able to go close to the abortion clinic and carry out what we call a blessing, but it is really a form of exorcism, so that the evil one can be overcome at that place, or at least as close to that place as we can. And the gifts that God gives the world through the priesthood, the priest is called to make use of those gifts. So that's why I do feel it is important for priests to be involved.
And when we look at this issue of abortion, Father, it can be, it certainly is a very sad and tragic issue to look at. And it could almost, seem quite depressing looking out at the world with, 250,000 abortions we have a year. What areas of hope do you see? Because that is, very much part of our faith as well. Do you see any areas of hope with regards to the pro-life issue?
I think I do, because certainly at that event that we had recently, and from what I hear from elsewhere, there seem to be new people and younger people getting involved, and younger people, and men and women, willing to take this stand and being committed to the prayer side of things, and also willing to take action. Because, I think there's great idealism in the youth, and I think if the pro-life movement can tap in to that idealism, that offers great hope for the future. For example, we have a large secondary school in my parish, and I've been hearing confessions there during Lent. And these are young people with young hearts, and they want to make the world a better place. They want their lives in this world to make a difference, and a difference for good. So I think if we can tap into that and help them to be guided towards the pro-life movement, then there's great hope.
So bringing this to an end then, Father, if there are any of those young people that you're talking about who are watching or listening to this, who are maybe considering getting involved in pro-life work but haven't done that yet? Maybe a few fears, feel it's, maybe a bit controversial. Is it going to be,
Yes.
a bit of a challenge? Are my friends going to, look at me differently? Is there anything that you could say to encourage them, maybe looking back at, yourself as a young man thinking about this issue?
Well, thinking especially with the 40 Days for Life method, it's important for us to emphasize that nothing is being imposed on anybody. It is a witness and a prayerful witness, and we offer help to those who are willing to avail of that help. Nobody is being judged. We're being there to support people and to offer that helping hand. And I do remember when I was involved with the action in the clinic in Arthur Road, sometimes we would hear that somebody would go into the clinic, but they would have seen us praying outside, and because we weren't judgmental or confrontational in any way, they changed their mind when they were in the clinic, and they'd come out before they had the abortion. So that's the method. It respects the individual. It's just something we make available, and it's backed up by prayer. So it's not controversial or confrontational.
Well, thank you so much for all the witness that you've given over the years, Father, and the inspiration to those, nowadays, the fact that you're still continuing to go and, practice your priestly ministry and also putting the pro-life beliefs into practice. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Father.